Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm Alicia from Alicia Be Creative, and in today's tutorial we are doing a true crime inspired tumbler. I purchased a sheet of adhesive opaque vinyl from Banff Custom Creations, and I have been so eager to get this on a cup, and I thought, what a perfect time now that we are kind of just getting into that spooky season. I thought this would be a super cute and fun design to create. So of course, everything that I use and talk about in today's tutorial will be listed and linked in the description box below. Check that description box out for discount links as well as all the links to my social media, including my Facebook group, Alicia Be Creative Community. So I feel like that's more than enough. Let's go ahead and jump right into today's tutorial. Okay, so I am starting with a sheet of vinyl from Banff Custom Creations. So this is her true crime vinyl. She has a very unique style of vinyl. It comes in transparent, opaque, and essentially it is different from the regular pattern vinyl that you purchase from normal pattern vinyl stores because it's printed on white ink as opposed to like a white sheet of paper, if that makes sense. So it's really unique vinyl. So I encourage you definitely to check her shop out, her website. I will link everything in the description box below. So I've already trimmed off the edges of the vinyl as well as trimmed the entire sheet so that it fits my tumbler with just a little bit of overlap on the top or bottom. And you guys have seen me do this before. So I've just peeled back the backing of the vinyl and adhered it to my cup. I'm now just going to double check that everything is going to line up on the other side straight before I apply the entire sheet of vinyl. So I love to use a combination of my squeegee tool as well as my hands to help me get the vinyl all the way wrapped around the cup. So again, you guys hear me say this all the time in all the videos that I apply vinyl. Definitely take your time with this. It is something that you get with practice. I have put my fair share of vinyl sheets on a tumbler completely crooked and wonky, so believe me, it is not usually something you're going to get on your first try, but I promise you, I have faith in you, you can definitely do it. So I'm just going to finish applying the vinyl with my hands here to get it all the way wrapped around before I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and get the extra vinyl for the overlap cut off. So using my pair of scissors, I have probably about 3 inches or so left of the vinyl. So I'm just going to trim that section off with my scissors before I adhere that last little bit of vinyl onto my cup. So there is a little bit of an overlap on my cup, probably about 1/4 of an inch or so, and normally I'd cut it, but for the sake of this, because it looked so beautiful and gorgeous and lined up perfectly, it almost looked seamless, I didn't want to mess with it, so I left that little bit of overlap where normally I'd trim that section off. So now we're going to go ahead and focus on the top and bottom rims just like normal. So again, with the bottom rim, I'm just going to pull the very edge of the vinyl over the bottom, making sure that along that bottom edge I am getting a smooth curve around the bottom. I don't want any bubbles or any air or anything on the bottom because then that could then lead to getting epoxy under my vinyl when I go to do my coats of epoxy. So just taking my time and focusing on the bottom before moving to the top, doing that same technique, just pulling very taut the vinyl straight and into the cup and just adhering it onto the inside of the cup so that I can cut that section off with my X-Acto knife. So very carefully using your X-Acto knife, you're just going to cut off the excess vinyl that is around the rim. Definitely make sure that you've put a brand new blade on your craft knife. That way it is that much easier to get that section of vinyl off. So after I've done that, I'm just going to take my squeegee and just make sure that everything is pressed firmly onto the cup and that I don't have any bubbles or creases in my vinyl up top. This isn't something you have to do, but I did have some wrinkles and things that I needed to make sure were nice and smooth. So now using my cup edging tool, which you guys have seen me use before, I'm just going to cut off that bottom edge of vinyl, that overlap that hangs over the bottom, creating a nice smooth and straight line along the bottom. I absolutely love this tool. This is like one of my favorite tools to use while I'm making cups, especially when I'm using vinyl or fabric, because it cuts a straight line because I could not cut a straight line to save my life. So I wanted to take a moment, since we're going to be working with epoxy, to remind everybody to wear their PPE. So this includes using gloves and your respirator mask to make sure that you're not breathing in any of the toxic fumes of epoxy. So epoxy is toxic until cured, so it's important that you are keeping yourself safe by wearing your gloves and your mask to ensure you're not breathing in any of those fumes. So I have mixed equal parts of traditional amazing clear cast epoxy. So I have 20 mLs in total of epoxy, and now you're just going to see me speed up and mix up my epoxy. So a couple tips when it comes to mixing epoxy. When you're mixing, you're going to want to mix slow. I know it looks like I'm mixing fast, but I'm actually mixing rather slow. And this is to make sure that you're not creating a bunch of micro bubbles, as well as making sure that your epoxy is mixed thoroughly. So I mix my epoxy from anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes even longer, just depending on the amount of epoxy that I'm using. But you want to make sure your epoxy is clear and micro bubble free before you go to apply it to anything. So now that my epoxy is nicely mixed, I'm going to take some Crimson Red from my Arteza Acrylic ink pack, and I'm going to put just a couple drops of that into my epoxy. So I did let my epoxy sit after mixing it for just a few minutes to just let it settle before I add my paint and thickener. So this is Stone Coat Epoxy Thickener. So I found this on Amazon. Normally I would have purchased CC DIY's Nice and Thick because I've heard great things about that, but for whatever reason I couldn't get that in time and I had found an alternative on Amazon that I wanted to try. So I've put just a little bit of that into a medicine cup, and I've put about 2 good scoopfuls into my epoxy before I begin to mix. So this is kind of a thick, fluffy powder, so you definitely want to make sure it's mixed thoroughly before going to apply this onto your cup. And what I did find is that less is more with any epoxy thickener. You definitely would rather add more thickener if you don't feel your consistency of your epoxy is thick enough than to dump a whole bunch in there and have like this huge clumpy, gloopy mess. Because I have definitely had that happen before when I have used other thickeners. So I'm just going to continue to play with the consistency of my epoxy thickening agent here. So again, you'll see I'm going to put about 4 to 5 small scoops into my epoxy and then mix thoroughly. I am waiting for 1 or 2 minutes in between to just see that it mixes up a little bit and gets a little bit thicker until I get the consistency that I want. So I want a slow drip. I don't want it to drip too fast because I don't want it to drip down the entire length of my cup. Okay, so let's get into applying drips. So I'm using my metal stir sticks in order to help me apply my epoxy that has my thickening agent in it. And what I like to do is get a pretty decent sized scoop and then twirl my metal stir stick around so the epoxy sticks to it before I apply it to the cup. The reason why I do this is because the paint itself in the epoxy makes the epoxy very stringy, and I don't want a bunch of strings that I have to clean off later on my cup. So when I am going to apply it to my cup, I'm focusing on the top rim. Now, not the very top of the cup, but that top edge where I would want to get that fine line of stainless steel. That's where I'm focusing my stir stick with the thickened epoxy on it to make sure that I am covering that up. I want to create a thick drip up top and then let that drip down the length of my cup. So it's important that you definitely take your time with this, and you'll also want to make sure that you're keeping your cup straight up or straight down at all times. So you'll notice that I flip back and forth between having my cup upside down, having my cup right side up, and this is how you're going to control the rate at which your epoxy drips. So definitely making sure that you are taking your time, but also focusing on the drips on your cup. It is kind of one of those things you have to just multitask in order to get your drips to drip and not drip too far, if that makes sense. So if I see that my drips are dripping too far down my cup, I'll flip my cup upside down, and that then just pulls the epoxy downward, obviously with gravity, and then when I flip it back right side up, it then lets it drip. So you get a little bit more time while you're applying your next layer of drip along the edge of your cup. So I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, feel free to message me in the comments or on social media, and I will help anyone who needs help with doing epoxy drips, because I know this is something that is definitely a little bit of a learning curve. So the other thing that you can do to get your epoxy to drip a little bit farther is to gently tap your cup against the table, so against a hard surface, and that just forces your epoxy to drip further down the cup. So after I'm satisfied with my drips, I have put my cup back on the turner and I let it spin until the epoxy is fully cured. So that took about 12 to 24 hours before I could safely pull that off the turner and be able to really work with it. And now I'm going to apply my decals. So this True Crime and Chill decal that I'm applying first, I created this using Canva. I didn't put together that type of tutorial today, but this SVG will be available both in my shop and in my group. So please make sure that you are either following me in those two spaces so that you can get your hands on this decal if you're interested. So the other things that I print or cut on my Cricut were just different kind of words that were on the newspaper print that's on the vinyl here. So I just used a creepy crawly font that I downloaded from dafont.com. I will list that font down in the description box and how you can download that for your use, and just picked different words that I saw on the vinyl and just used those in this font. So once I've printed and cut those, I'm then just applying those in random spaces on my cup where I feel like they'll go best. So as soon as I get this all applied as far as a vinyl, I'm actually going to be adding a little bit of extra blood, so to speak, to this cup. And so I'm going to be putting that crimson red Arteza acrylic paint back in a cup and using my hands and fingers in order to give this cup a little extra gore, if you will. So I'm going to use the paintbrush and the paint to paint both my fingers and kind of the top portion of my hand there, and then apply some fingerprints onto the bottom portion of the cup, which you're going to see me do. And then I'm also going to go around the cup and add some extra bloody fingerprints along the cup as well. I just wanted this to be like a true crime cup. I love being able to see handprints and that kind of like look on this kind of styled cup that I've seen before, and so I wanted to try my hand at that as well. So now I'm just going in with my painted thumbprints and just adding different prints around the cup where I felt there needed to be some extra space. So as soon as I am done with that, I will put this cup back on the turner for 2 final coats of epoxy before my cup was finished. This one was a super fun one to make, and I really can't believe I was able to accomplish this one. It's been one I've wanted to try for so long, and I'm so glad I finally got to it. If you loved today's video, give this video a huge thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys again next week.